What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode. You're in for an epic treat. I've been thinking long and hard about how to level up the channel, and Tesla was sort of round one, but how do we continue documenting entrepreneurs changing the world, building these crazy companies, where I think I've unlocked a way to do it. And today we're going to take you behind the scenes and tell you about the next phase of HyperChange, the next phase of Hyper Gwop, and how we're taking all of this to the next level.
Shit, dog, are we gonna have to sell more Bitcoin because we have such a dope deal? Like, yes.
It's startups, it's founders.
$10 to $15 million fund, $250K to $1 million check.
Yeah, and it's really creating this flywheel effect between like HyperChange and Hyper Gwop.
The world doesn't need more FOMO investors.
We've been fighting as hard as possible to not launch a fund.
The past year, we did 8 more deals and deployed $21 million.
My Tesla journey, we can offer that same access and open it up and make it accessible and authentic for startup investing.
An incredible opportunity to like dramatically change like the scope of our species.
The first time I'm able to scale myself.
We want to make VC more approachable to the next generation, and we need more builders. We need to like support this future and like manifest it.
What up, everybody? Today we're stoked to announce 2 different things. The first is we're taking Hyper Gwop to the next level with a VC fund called Atlantis. The second is we're documenting that journey with a YouTube show called the Kickback that you're watching right now. This is Aiden, who's been helping me behind the scenes run Hyper Gwop, make some crazy power moves, and I'm stoked to have him with me on the next part of this journey.
I've had the pleasure to see Gally build HyperChange over the last few years, and most recently, in the last year, work with Gally and Hyper Gwop, where we've had the opportunity to invest in entrepreneurs that are changing the world. Before we get into talking about Hyper Gwop Atlantis in the new show, The Kickback, we need to rewind a little bit and tell you how we got here today. Gally, the man, the myth, the legend, the founder of HyperChange. Tell us, how did you get into investing and when did you start documenting your investing journey?
Yeah, so I got into investing when my uncle gave me the Warren Buffett biography called The Snowball, showing the power of compounding and how betting on stocks meant you owned a piece of a business. And I just fell in love with this. And then my mantra was, the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. The biggest challenges we face as a species are an opportunity for founders to create the biggest companies. The number one problem I saw for our generation, climate change. How do we get sustainable energy and transportation? When I figured out Elon Musk was doing that with Tesla, read his master plan, I couldn't get enough. Became an investor, became a shareholder, became obsessed with making a YouTube channel to document being an investor because I felt like I had no one in my life that was excited about it. So I was like, maybe someone on the internet will be, you know?
Totally. And so like, what was that process like launching HyperChange, getting on the Tesla earnings call? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I started my YouTube channel just with the idea that like CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal, they're kind of a little too proper. They're never wrong. They weren't accessible to our generation. So I was like, you talking about your investments, that's the show you would want to watch. Just somebody being honest about it, explaining their thought process, what stocks they were buying or selling. So I started doing that, getting a little traction for covering Tesla. It was my biggest investment, so like all my videos. And then my subscribers vouched for me to get on the Tesla earnings call. One tweet led to another. Next thing you know, I'm asking Elon Musk all these questions, touring all the different Tesla factories, making videos to bring my subscribers along, and felt like I was part of this crazy, incredible future that Tesla was building when they needed my help to get the word out about why this was so important. And it's not about next quarterly production numbers, it's about the technology we're building that's gonna matter in 10 years for humanity. And so like reframing that conversation.
And that's super dope, but how does that relate to startups and like what we're trying to do today with Hyper Gwop Atlantis?
Exactly, because we're starting a VC fund and everyone's like, public companies, startups, they're all different. Well, really they're just companies that are building a product or service led by a founder. And Tesla was worth 30 or 40 billion at the time when I started my YouTube channel, but they were still really a startup. They were burning a ton of capital. Their main product that would take them to profitability, the Model 3, didn't exist yet. They were led by a crazy founder who had all these crazy long-term visions who people needed to bet on. So in many ways, I feel like Tesla was a startup. And then once Tesla started growing and expanding, it's like, wait, like this is the most exciting part of a company's journey, is when they're trying to figure out their product. The founder has a crazy vision, but nobody really believes in them. How do we help them tell that story? How do we get them the capital and resources and the word out for them to sort of cross that chasm?
Okay, tell us about Space Filchi, the first SPV that you set up.
Huge piece of the startup journey, so which involved Aiden. So I'm investing, writing these little startup checks, and then somebody offers me the ability to get into SpaceX. And I'm like, oh my God. Problem is, the minimum is way higher than the amount of money I have. I discovered this thing called an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, essentially creating a legal entity to crowdfund and pool capital for my friends and I to be able to make that investment. So we did that. Aiden, a couple other friends, Julian, Maddie Mogul, Rob, shout out to the homies. We pooled our money together and were able to invest in SpaceX. And I was like, wow, the power of us crowdfunding and investing in startups is incredible. Imagine if we created a system to do this. And like, I'm covering all the startups on my channel, I'm interviewing the founders, I'm writing them a couple $1,000 checks. What if I get my accredited subscribers to combine and write them $1 million check? All of a sudden, we can become as big as a VC firm. So I decided to start Hyper Gwop after a lot of research, partnering with Cooley, and launch on a YouTube channel, a syndicate, hyperguap.com. A bunch of you joined. And I did my first deal investing in Carta. We did over $10 million, had a bunch of LPs. I literally was doing it all by myself while running HyperChange and doing all this other stuff, was super overwhelmed, went to LA for, just to hang out with my friends almost exactly a year ago, met up with Aiden, was telling him about Hyper Gwop, and he's like, wait, or maybe you can give your...
Yeah, so you came to LA, you were telling me you had all these LPs that you were managing, there was all these millions of dollars and operational needs that you needed, and I was like, yo, I've done this stuff at eGenesis, I've like helped raise over $225 million, I've been the chief of staff, I know how to operationalize things, like let's do this, like let me help you. So we sat down that same week that Gally came into town to travel, we closed out the Carter deal, and from there, and over the past year, we did 8 more deals and deployed $21 million. And that was the start of the beta test of the Hyper Gwop VC syndicate and how we got here today.
Dude, hell yeah.
Fuck yeah, I think I
Dude,
nailed
that's
it.
perfect.
And so Lightship, which was our second deal, kind of like had this aha moment for me because we had a small allocation and decided to give it to people who already had a Cybertruck on order and wanted to get a towable electric RV. Sort of a customer focus group to help Lightship develop their product. And it was just this incredible synergy of like bringing the community to life and rally around this cause that we all believed in.
And I think that's what differentiates Hyper Gwop from like a lot of other traditional investment funds, which is our LP base, we like to refer to them as super LPs. And I've seen this firsthand as like running kind of the investor relations for Hyper Gwop, is that people really care about the companies that they're investing in and want to help and support. A lot of the times like capital is anonymized and the LPs might just give the money to the fund manager and then sit back and not really do anything. This is different at Hyper Gwop. Our LPs are super engaged, they're committed to making a difference, and I think that's like a huge differentiator that we offer to our startup founders.
We keep hitting these amazing deal flows, the returns are awesome, our LPs are excited, and the deal flow isn't stopping. Fighting as hard as possible to not launch a fund. Like, we really didn't want to do this, except the more and more we thought about it, frankly seeing insane deal flow that was either too confidential to share with our LPs or was moving too quickly to give to our LP network, I've seen that even though I think we're getting some of the best deals in the world now, we're even not getting access to some even better ones because we don't have a fund. So if we're gonna go all the way and fund these companies, give them the show they deserve, put the money behind the production of that show, give them the time and focus they deserve because we have the resources, that means launching a fund to take this to the next level. So now let's tell y'all more about what we've been setting up here, Hyper Gwop Atlantis.
Yeah, first off, I just want to say how freaking stoked I am to like be here and working on Hyper Gwop Atlantis, because this is like an incredible opportunity to like dramatically change like the scope of our species, and I think that we have the platform with HyperChange to be able to do that.
We need to hyperchange so many different industries, and it's not happening fast enough, and these founders aren't getting enough capital. So how do we create the structure to solve that problem?
Totally, and a lot of this stuff has been like behind closed doors, and like VC and like startup is kind of like an opaque industry. And sure, there's things like Shark Tank that help kind of demystify the process, but we think we want to make VC more approachable to the next generation, and that's a huge part of what we want to do with the show and why we structured the fund as a 506c, to be able to raise in public, to be able to document our VC journey, and to make it approachable really for anyone that's interested in like shaping the future. And we do think the best way to shape the future isn't these old institutions, isn't the government, it's startups, it's founders. These are the people that are building the future, and this is why we want to document their journey and invest in them.
And so what is Hyper Gwop Atlantis itself? Like, obviously we're starting a venture capital firm. That means we're taking in money, crowdfunded, as Aiden said, from our subscribers who are accredited. And this is kind of a cutting edge, new type of venture fund we're forming in partnership with AngelList, where we can do it online. And that's the spirit of HyperChange and documenting our journey. And just like we kind of, you know, I felt like we kind of uncovered what it's like to be an investor and have skepticisms and be unsure of yourself on my Tesla journey, we can offer that same access and open it up and make it accessible and authentic for startup investing, which, like you said, is super opaque. And I'm like, that's why we wanted to call it the Kickback, because we want you to join us like our friend and kick back with us and talk about ideas, talk about changing the world. And like, that's our vibe, and that's our vibe when we hang out with founders and we're like, man, this is the show that we want to watch.
Finding entrepreneurs who are doing really important shit, you know, like stuff that like really mattered to the world, that was gonna make a difference, that everyone could rally behind. Like, this is human level problems that matter for our species, and I just like didn't find that content on the internet. And like, Gally has the platform and the community with HyperChange to do that.
And what did HyperChange do that I'm most proud of is we made batteries cool. We made people care about batteries. And I think the biggest problem now is too many people tonight are gonna care about the Kraken game. And nobody's gonna care about the 20 startup founders who are working their ass off in Seattle with no credit to actually build a future that matters to us. And so that's the goal with what we can do now is shine a spotlight on those entrepreneurs, give them the attention they deserve, and say, okay, rooting for the Kraken's dope, no offense to hockey, but let's be on Team Human and root for Earth and using technology to build an amazing future for all of us. And
yeah, I mean, the entrepreneurs are the athletes. Like, that's the goal of what we're trying to show. Is like, we want this to be part of the cultural zeitgeist. Like, these are the people that are making a difference. This shit actually matters. And I think it's like so important for us to like recalibrate our society because we're so focused on athletes and celebrities and stuff that doesn't matter. And I just think like we got to focus on the people that are really making a change. And that's what we're going to do at HyperGuap Atlantis.
And that's why HyperGuap Atlantis is a venture capital firm, but it's also a media company. And we figured out a way to structure it where we can bring all that in-house, but not really change the costs for our LPs and investors. And, you know, up until starting HyperGuap now, like for the past year, like we got paid nothing. In fact, we literally invested in every deal. So we were putting in all the sweat equity to close all the deals, to talk to all the founders, to do all the work for no money. And then on top of that, we were writing a couple $1,000 into the company. Yeah. So it was like, man, like we just can't, we're kind of broke now because we've been investing in all these, we had so many good startup deals. I'm like on the phone with Aiden. It's like, shit, dog, are we gonna have to sell more Bitcoin because we have such a dope deal? Like, yes. You know, we deployed 21 million in our first year. And that's why with our fund, we're starting with about a 10 to $15 million fund is our goal. And we'll also augment that with the syndicate. So we feel like that's right in our sweet spot of, you know, 250K to $1 million checks we've been writing, pre-seed to Series A to Series B companies, working with the exact founders we are. And then at the same time, our fee structure, 20% carry and a 1.5% management fee taken over 10 years is a little bit lower than the traditional 2 and 20. So we were stoked about that. But it also gives us the wiggle room and capital to hire Aiden full time, hire amazing cinematographers and video producers like Devin, who's behind the camera, to help us bring this story to life, tell these founder stories. And like, we can do all of that with our budget that a normal VC fund would just take to like take meetings and be boring and do fancy dinners. Not like we're starting as like a hungry, hustle ready, like investing that and also being a media company as well. And so that's what gets me so excited is like, now I feel like this is, for me personally, like the first time I'm able to scale myself. I have more capital than I just have. I have more resources to make the content than it's just me. And that's to me where I feel like this is gonna be able to have a bigger impact.
Yeah, and it's really creating this flywheel effect between like HyperChange and HyperGuap to tell these founder stories and really get into our investment, why we're bullish on them, and just communicate what they're building to the public. And I think that's a huge value add that we've been able to do kind of organically right now through HyperChange, but it's really formalizing that process and operationalizing it.
So Eden, you and I were pretty broke the first time we met, and now we're investing combined $100,000 into this fund, which is a huge chunk of our capital. Like selling, I haven't sold my Tesla yet, but I think I'm gonna have to sell Tesla stock, Bitcoin, a little bit Ethereum. Like I'm putting a huge amount of resource into this fund. And the reason is because being a HyperGuap investor and customer myself, I've been on the front lines and I'm like, man, the deals we're getting are insane. Like deep down, I am just genuinely convinced that the biggest alpha right now in the entire financial system is with these pre-seed Series A and Series B startups. And if you can get the access and if you can prove you're a value add to them and get on those cap tables, that is gonna dwarf any return in any asset class, bar none.
And really HyperGuap Atlantis is a product that we kind of wanted. We've been structuring our personal start portfolios in a way that has like some growth stage investments to de-risk things like SpaceX and Carta. We've done really early investments like pre-seed into Carbon Collective or Rainbow in the Series A.
I've invested in companies as small as 500K and I was the first investor in them. Shout out to Pigeon Loans. Now they're in YC raising at 20 million bucks, like this epic little story. But I've also invested in SpaceX at $30 billion. So, but the way I've structured my startup portfolio is smaller bets for the riskier stages, and then as I have more conviction, scaling in bigger bets. And we've seen that work, and that's why I kind of like this Atlantis approach. Like, is it Series A? Is it this or that? It's like, it's almost like a diversified bet on the startup ecosystem, sort of levered and distributed to where we have the most conviction. When we meet with founders, like we sort of have one hand behind our back, which is like, yeah, we have money, but it takes 30 days, but we don't really know how much it is, but we don't actually have a fund, but we're not working on this full time. And now it's like, bam, it's like we have the capital to backstop you. Like you know, and it just sort of changes the conversation. And I feel like now we're actually coming to the table with like the full suite of offerings that the startup founder needs. You need money now, that's great. You also, and I also want to make this super clear, like we're not abandoning the syndicate HyperGuap model. Like in an ideal world, like, and there's going to be some deals where only the fund can get into because the fund has priority. But ideally, we want to make it so the fund deploys a chunk and our SPV deploys a chunk so we can get those super customers, so we can get those super LPs. And we also have a whole nother system on the back end so we can even give carry of those SPVs to influencers who give us deals. And we also want to have our schemer program where we incentivize you to give us deal flow and then we give you carry in our deals. So this is the best of both worlds of the capital backstop, the ability to do the show, but also using that doubling down on that crazy syndicate model where we get huge influencers, huge value add investors, people who really care about the mission directly on the cap table. And I think the entire venture industry is frankly moving towards this hybrid approach.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point that we haven't really touched on yet is this influencer support system where we can really get a bunch of influencers in on a deal who can then communicate and tell that story. And we can incentivize them in the right way with carry. And this just like, quite frankly, isn't being done yet with influencers that are like galvanizing around the same deal and working together to tell that story. And we think HyperGuap Atlantis is the vehicle to be able to do that.
Like, damn, like, do I want to sell out? Do I want to do a VC fund? Do it, like, I'm like, damn, bro, like, you're really good at this. The founders we're helping need the money, and like they're up at midnight and I'm scheming with them and I'm having a big impact on their vision and it matters, and I feel like we're really helping the world and like doing it in a powerful way and doing it contrarian. Like we give you money before it's a FOMO, everybody else is giving you money, like the dopest VC in the world's tweeting about you, like of course we want in. It's like, nah, like Rainbow, my friend Mike Demerai, he's in McCarran Park, it's midnight, he's gonna create Snapchat meets Robinhood for the Ethereum blockchain, it's gonna be crazy, and I like, you know, bet in on that before they go on YC, and now it's like a FOMO of like everyone trying to get in with them, they're gonna be $1 billion company and change everything, but like, I realized that alpha and that contrarian and like believing in it because you have your own thesis that's in your head, not because someone else you think is smart invested in something, like, I just think that's a really powerful differentiator that I frankly didn't see in the like everybody's FOMO investing and we're not. And I'm like, the world doesn't need more FOMO investors. They need people who really think differently. And that's also where the alpha is.
And I think that goes to the saying of HyperGuap, invest in the future you believe in. Like we have a vision of what the world should look like. Like being the younger generation, we have a unique perspective. We think about the future a lot more than like a 50-year-old manager who might only have another 40 years to live. Like we have another 50, 60 years to live. And I think like we have a different perspective on what matters in the future and like care about what things look like. And I think like that shapes like the way that we think about American optimism and creating this like different type of future that we want to live in. And like we just have a different perspective on it.
Yeah. We want the future to be inspiring. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like to me, when I think about like what the government's doing or what I see on Twitter or the internet, like I don't get inspired or excited about the future. But then when I'm in the HyperGuap world and we're talking to these founders and they're telling us their vision for the, like, that makes me inspired and excited about the future. And yeah.
And so like, why the name HyperGuap Atlantis? Like
Atlantis. Yeah. How do we...
I mean, like for us, like Atlantis was this like utopian, like fictional idea that like went underwater and that we lost in the past, but we're kind of flipping it on its head and realizing it's something that we can create in the future. And it's really something that if we invest our capital in the right way, support founders, reshape culture to caring about the things that matter, that we can rebuild the new Atlantis of the future, which is really caring about the things that are going to make a difference for you and I.
So, are you going to have a call to action at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I call to action it?
Maybe.
I think that's the move.
So, HyperGuap Atlantis. We're launching this fund, crazy bet. It's crazy ambitious. It's going to be epic and fun, and we're documenting it, and you can get involved. If you're an accredited investor, you can hit the link below, check out the page, decide if you want to invest. The minimum is $200,000. That's because of legal the way that it's legally set up. Like, we can only have a certain amount of people. We got to hit the minimums. But if you're a HyperGuap member, you're a homie, and you really want to invest and you can't meet that minimum, like, send us a note. We'll try and make it work because we want to get everybody who wants to be involved in this. Am I missing anything else, Aiden? Or should they just be stoked? And
yeah, I mean, we already have like about a quarter of the fund committed at this point. It's left. We are targeting that 10 million number, but we're able to go up to 15 depending on like the demand and the type of check sizes that come in.
But the good thing is, even if you don't invest in the fund, I think for the first time, even if you're not investing in a VC fund, you're gonna care about one because we're doing such good stuff and the show is so fun to watch.
It's powerful.
The pause is powerful.
Yeah. And I think that you always pause shorter than you
and it feels it feels a little forced still.
Yeah.
But I think we might just...
I I think
Right
just,
back.
We're running back one more time.
yeah.
We are live.
Honestly, I do the what up thing. I think that
Like helps you, yeah.
it gets you. Just be
Yeah.
like, okay, so now we're about to.
Yeah. Yo. Kickback.
Cheers,
so
bro.
fun.
That was awesome.
Like, get the first episode behind us. This is the momentum. That.
And we're walking up the stairs, and you're like, dude, like, I feel like the future's happening now. I love that. There's not many days when I feel like, ooh, like, this is big.
Momentum.
Oh, we want to travel the world, make these 12 to 15 minute videos, visit all these crazy companies, talk to these crazy founders. I'm like, dude, this is what I've been trying to do. This is HyperChange. Like, this has been like so long in the making to get to the point where we can do this. And shout out to Gary V, because I feel like this is the most Gary V VC fund ever.
Yeah. And like, one more thing I want to say is like, shout out to like all the dope investors out there, like lower carbon, 50 years, like the types of investors that are
A16Z.
A16Z.
Like, these are people who inspired us, and like, even though they're our competition, we realized like it's not even about like VC this, VC that. It's like we're all on Team Human trying to fund the future. And I think even though it seems like everybody's doing VC, there actually isn't enough of us.
And we need more builders, and we need to like support this future and like manifest it. And it feels super exciting to be like at the starting line right now.
Yeah, but honestly, true that, like lower carbon, especially like Chris Sacca, like legend for like the dopest returns on his VC fund of all time, and then triples down from lowercase capital to start lower carbon, which is all about, very similar to HyperChange, investing in companies to transition us off fossil fuels, like a sort of clear like vision for the future that we're betting on, that we need to have happen, and building the firm around that, not just how can we make the most money.
Totally.
And so I feel like those people inspired us, and like,
Yeah. I mean, I just hope we covered everything, because there's like so much that we've been feeling and so much passion that goes into this and so much that we're trying to do that we wanted to get it across in like a very short, like 15 to 20 minute video. And we did our best of doing that, but like there's only so much you can say and compact, but it feels like we have such like a big vision of where this can go.
Well, cheers and turn around.
thanks, Devin.